Okay, well, let's go ahead and call our May 19th, 2021 Finance Committee meeting to order. We got a couple of items on the agenda tonight, and thank you everybody for coming out and talking through these important items. Kathy, if you could just maybe start us off by our item number 1 there, reading the title and the sponsor of our first discussion item.
Proposal number 3. Proposal number 3, 2021, introduced by Councilor Chevlot and Councilor Russell. A proposal for an ordinance appropriating additional funds and amending the 2021 budget as approved by the Common Council with respect to the General Fund, Motor Vehicle Highway Fund, EMS Fund, Administrative Services Fund, and Garage Fund.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. And Tom, you sponsored this. If you could give us a little background, but I see you're outside. I was going to do the same, but there's a little flock of birds there that would, I think, override me. So came inside, but so just a hint of jealousy and proud of you were able to get out today.
Yeah, so if you remember when the budget was first presented, there was this caveat that we weren't really sure whether or not what 21 was going to look like based on a number of issues, obviously, all with respect to funding the city and all the different various buckets. And so the controller presented the budget with this in here, but we were only appropriating at 3%. And now this proposal is to come back and to appropriate the additional 2% based on what he has seen with our financials in the first 5 months of the year.
Okay. Any other counselors, Counselor Giles or Counselor Chavis, do you have any comments or thoughts?
I'm still muted. Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry. I think. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
No, Tom explained exactly what it is. Pretty clear cut. We had a clear understanding of what we were doing at the time, and I don't have really any questions to it.
Sean, I do.
Oh, go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry.
I just want to have one caveat. It just slipped my mind. I wanted to end it with this, is that the one thing that we talked about back in the fall that we were unsure of was going to be what kind of monies we were going to receive from the federal government that were going to be a pass-through from the Indianapolis City Council back into the cities. And I understand Indianapolis didn't disperse the funds that we thought we were going to get. And so my question for Jason is, was your thought that we would be getting the $7 million and part of this funding would be coming from that $7 million? Or were you anticipating not getting the 7 and funding it from general fund?
So last fall, when we were having our budget discussions, and given it was mainly the uncertainty with ongoing revenue heading into this year, and specifically the income tax and some revenue sources along that line. So last fall, when the budget was prepared, we did not know if we were going to receive any money under the CARES Act. So I think that's the number you're referencing, where
yes,
based on population, we should have gotten about 7 million under the CARES Act, and we were only allocated 700,000 from Indianapolis under the CARES Act. So we definitely did not get our fair share then. Even if we did, we weren't planning on that being necessarily used to support raises going forward. And kind of similarly, under the American Rescue Plan, the entitlement city amounts have already been allocated, and there's the non-entitlement city amounts, which we would be one of. And right now, we're not sure whether we will get any money under the American Rescue Plan either. The 4 excluded cities in Marion County which would be us, Beech Grove, Southport, and Speedway, have all, in conjunction with Indianapolis and a variety of other parties, have done the best we can to make it recognized with the Treasury that we were not included on the allocation list. And as of at least last week, we don't know whether we're on that list or not. We think there's a possibility, the way the regulation reads, is that the state of Indiana, which will receive the pot of money to then distribute to the non-entitlement cities, could include the 4 excluded cities from Marion County, but right now we have not gotten an answer from either the Treasury or the state of Indiana as to whether we will be on that list or not. And we think if we are on that list, that number could be somewhere in the 5 to 8 million range, or it could be 0.
And Jason, I have a quick question on that. And so that range, anywhere from 0 to 8, those funds typically wouldn't be used for salaries, though, correct?
That's correct. And what we're proposing with Proposal 3 is independent on whether we get any money from the American Rescue Plan. It basically has 4 categories of allowable uses. One is revenue replacement. So as an example, the MVH funding, took a hit last year with the reduced driving, variety of different revenue replacement. You can also use it to provide a stipend or bonus to essential workers. There are some kind of business recovery rescue plans, so to speak, in there. And then the 4th category is for infrastructure, which only is for water, sewer, and broadband, I believe. So if we were to get some funding, which we hope we will, that would be used for things other than this proposal number 3.
Okay, and I only have one other question, and that is, I know maybe a couple months ago, the conversation that we were having was around doing a 3% and then a 2%, one-time bonus or whatever. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on why we went from doing the 3 and 2 to just doing the 5.
I think our thought there was, as we started to see, the one caveat is we don't have property tax numbers yet for the first half of the year, although I don't know if I'm overly concerned with that number. The main one was the income tax, and we were purposely conservative in the budget last year, but it appears that just on income tax alone in the general fund, we're probably will end up about $400,000 above what we budgeted. We also have the public safety tax fund, which will be probably $300,000 above what we budgeted. And then just conservatively excluding property taxes, looking at the general fund, I think right now we're on target to probably exceed budgeted revenue by about $600,000 for the year. So absent any surprises from here until the end of the year, we felt that given the numbers are better than what we had planned, that we could justify doing the 5% on salary overall versus the 3 and 2.
Okay, so the 400,000 and the 300,000, do you think that we're going to see those bumps in perpetuity, or what was unique? Why do you think we got those bumps this year, and do you think that that's going to continue for next year and the year after that for sustainability of the increase?
I think the increase above budgeted revenue this year was probably more a product of us being a little too conservative last year, because we just didn't know what to expect heading in to this year, although we did know that collections, or what we're receiving this year, would have been based on 2019, so pre-COVID collections, but we also wanted to try to kind of bridge the real gap which would occur next year by taking that conservative approach. So I would hope if in the 22 budget, taking a similar conservative approach, we might experience a similar positive surprise on actual receipts next year.
Okay. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom. Please.
I just want to have one follow-up question. Jason, is this additional 2% going to be on a go-forward basis, or are you,
Yes.
because I was reading through it and I didn't catch, so it's not going to be retroactive, it's going to be after this is approved?
If approved, our proposal was to make it retroactive to January 1st, so it would be as if employees did get a 5% increase for the entire year. So the retroactive piece, if approved, would be made in June, and then going forward, it would be per pay 5%.
Okay.
And just for, I think we already talked about this, Chair, but I just had a question for Jason for the record. Elected officials are all excluded from this proposal, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Jason, I think you hit on, and thanks to the other, my committee members, you pretty well hit all my questions and concerns as well, except for maybe two thoughts I had. There was a question, I don't remember who asked it, about the American Rescue Plan, and I know our neighbors in other counties did use that, for a variety of different reasons, but you're saying there's other reasons than just salary. So that's really good to hear, and we might see something down the road. I know in the very beginning, we were having these discussions about the salary ordinance. There was a concern that the state of Indiana might flatten, since there might have been a bump this year or next, then 21 or 22 and 23 could be lower. So they might flatten this year and in order to compensate for next year. I didn't follow the state on far as if they did that or not. Are you aware if they passed that?
I have not seen on income tax any guidance for next year. I do know that we haven't seen the number yet for Lawrence, but the supplemental release for this year is out, and typically we get ours kind of lagging because we're in Unigov. There's a separate calculation, but based on our estimates, I think we will receive a supplemental distribution, which is not included in the numbers that I gave you in terms of where I think we're ahead of what was budgeted. So I think these numbers, provided we do get that supplemental, will look even better. But we haven't received guidance, at least I haven't seen it yet, for next year.
Great. Thank you. I'm very excited. This was the resolution I was hoping would come before our committee, so I'm excited to read this one.
If I can just add one last thing. So assuming there's a vote to go to council, we will need to have a public hearing if the council chooses to put this up for vote at the first meeting in June. So I will be advertising that, probably tomorrow. So just as an FYI, because it's an additional appropriation, we will need to conduct a public hearing at the next meeting date when this will be up for vote.
So if this was recommended to council, the full council would not vote on it tonight. We would wait till the full public hearing. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from any of committee members? All right.
I'm sorry, Chair. I just wanted to piggyback on your question. I mean, if we feel like we have all of our questions answered, we could definitely vote on it tonight.
No, you can't, Lisa. You have to have the public hearing on a new appropriation.
Oh, that's right, because we're going to open it up for public hearing prior to the vote on the agenda.
Right, so it can come out of committee tonight.
Yeah. I stand corrected. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I would entertain a motion, or do I have a motion for
I'll make the motion.
this one? Okay, I have a motion to accept. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Second, okay. I think Councilor Giles was trying, but Tom, you may have got it in there quicker because he was muted. All right. right, so we'll do a roll call vote since we're virtual. So Councilman Chevlot? I think he broke up just slightly. I didn't hear your response, sorry. Yes?
It's an aye.
It's an aye, all right.
Yes.
Perfect. Councilman Giles?
Aye.
Councilor Chavis?
Aye.
Councilor Denny? Aye. So it passes 4-0. All right, and then the next item, I'm doing everything on one screen here, so I'm going back over to our agenda. So Kathy, could you read the next item on our agenda, please?
Hey,
Resolution number 7, 2021. Resolution number 7, 2021, introduced by Councilor Chevlot, a resolution of the Common Council of the City of Lawrence, Indiana, making a preliminary determination to enter into lease to finance fire station project.
Okay, and Councilor Chevlot, are you, hopefully we didn't lose you there. I think we did. So is there anyone in the, or I would like to open up the discussion to either Councilman Giles or Councilor Chavis on this. Do you have any questions for administration or thoughts?
I do.
Please, Councilman Giles.
All right. So I guess this question is for, I wanted to get an explanation on the increase. I noticed that the bond amount could go up to, maximum of $11 million. And I want to hear why. Get a justification there.
So we did factor in a higher not to exceed borrowing amount. Doesn't necessarily mean we will borrow the 11 million, but the project for Station 38 was originally estimated at, right around 9 million for the construction cost. Plus we have some additional cost of issuance, capitalized interest for the bonding. So that would have put us in the, I'll call it the higher 9 million range. But given the commodity increases that have been experienced this year, and I have Paul Okeson on the call as well, and he can walk through that a little bit. We felt we needed to have a little bit of cushion if we get into this when the project's bid, and because of the cost increases, if it comes in higher, we wanted to be able to ensure that we could still get the project done. But just because it has 11 million in there doesn't at this point mean we will be borrowing 11. We just needed to have that flexibility given the current pricing environment.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Sean?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Councilman Denny. Councilor Chevlot needs to be let back in.
I see it. Yeah, he's in. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
I wanted to follow up a question to your point there, just on number, and this is just off topic just slightly, but you mentioned the 11 million. In one portion of it mentions the lease will be no longer than 20 years, commencing the date of the issuance of these bonds, if approved, and then go to the next point, and it is that the full duration of the bonds themselves will be for 10 years if the city enters into the lease. So are we giving a lease for 20 but financing for 10? Or did I misunderstand that?
The bonding would definitely be 20 years, and I think that's the maximum term that can be issued. And I'm going to defer to Bruce Donaldson, but I think the 10-year schedule is just, are we required to show for the next 10 years what that impact would be?
Yes, this is Bruce Donaldson, and that's exactly right, Jason. The statute that we're operating under requires us to make that calculation for 10 years, even though the bond will go out longer than that.
So the bond itself then clarifies 20 years is what you're considering.
Yes.
So going back to some of the work we did in 2020 of refinancing some of our 20-year bonds into 30, why are we not looking at 30 here? And it's just a point of inquiry. Why are you focused on 20 versus 30, which is what we refinanced some of those other bonds for?
The bonds that we issued last year that were 30 years were water revenue bonds, and I think, and again, I'll defer to Bruce, but I believe that's a different statute that allows the revenue bonds to issue a longer final maturity, and I believe we're limited to a maximum of 20 years under this type of financing.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, so it's not a change of strategy within your bonding and what you're thinking as far as budgetary reasons, fiscal reasons. It's within the statute is the reason you're going to 20.
Yeah, I would say if the statute allowed us to go out longer, we would go out longer, just given the interest rate
especially at these rates.
Yep.
Councilor Chevlot, this
Thank you.
was your proposal. Did you want to lead us off or have any? Yes.
Yeah, okay, good.
I think right when I said, but Councilor Chevlot, do you have anything? It froze completely. Yeah.
So just a couple of things to note. First off, in the language of this, this is a property tax increase. And I think that's important for everyone to know. I was curious if there's been, I mean, we've got the data, it's 0.005, I printed it out, 0.0588 per $100 of assessed, but just for, in layman's term, what does that mean on a $200,000 assessed value home to the citizens of Lawrence? What are they going to see a tax increase of?
If I could clarify on that, the way the resolution, the information that the resolution requires to be presented is just comparing the city's debt service tax rate. And so it compares the debt that or in this case, the municipal building corp debt that the city has without this proposal, and then with this proposal. And right now we have 2 fire station bonds that mature in the next year and a half. And then when those are gone, absent this one, we'll only have the police station debt. So it's then showing this with the police station debt. So on the debt service tax rate itself, it is showing a 5-cent increase on the debt service tax rate. But the city's overall tax rate when we started planning this project was 0.815, and our current tax rate this year with the new debt service tax rate, assuming the fire station bonds are built, would be 0.8289, so roughly a penny increase, but that's assuming under this resolution that the debt service column assumes we issue 11 million at the max interest rate, which is likely not to happen because I think the environment for a 20-year bond right now is about half what the max rate in the resolution is. So roughly speaking, I think when we're all said and done, there probably will be a very minimal increase, if at all.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Jason, the other thing that's come to mind is we've seen over the last, at least I have, in a kind of a personal way, that the home purchase price in Lawrence is, people are paying 20% of asking, and assessors love that because what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years with the county assessors is that even though we're capped at 1%, the best way to grow revenue is go out and reassess the property every year. So has this been factored in of what this is going to look like in the next 1 or 2 years, where you have a home that 2 years ago was assessed at $200,000, but now it's at $230,000, and so that tax rate is going to be on $230,000 instead of $200,000. And so do you see that as actually a way that helps us pay this back faster? Or kind of walk us through that, or maybe I'm missing this.
I have Bob Swintz on as well. I know he and I talked kind of similar about this morning, so maybe, Bob, if you want to chime in on this.
Sure. In the numbers that you're looking at now, and just to add to what Jason said, we didn't assume any growth in assessed value. So when you see like a 5% tax rate increase, that's assuming that the assessed value stays the same as it is for pay 2021. If you look at your assessed values over the last couple of years, you've really averaged a little bit over 5% growth in your assessed value. So while we may have a growth in assessed value, it's not necessarily more money to pay the debt service because we may have a reduction in the tax rate. So we may not have a 5% or a 5-cent increase. We may actually have a decrease, but either way, the growth in that assessed value will be of a benefit for paying off the bonds.
The second question, or maybe it's 2.5, is years ago, Jason, when you came on board, you did a great job of laying out how we needed to get back to an emergency fund of, I believe when we first started, we wanted to get to 10%, then we moved to 15%. And now it's well above that. Has there been any consideration about using some of those cash reserves to maybe not go for the full 11, which would reduce our payment or interest? Or can we do that?
I think we could do that, given kind of where we were in our plan, at least, to build up our reserve, and given that I think the impact in terms of a tax increase is minimal here, even if we were to issue the full 11 million, because we're likely not to issue that at the 5% interest rate, that we felt that we have identified some other projects that we wanted to also get done as we go into the 2022 budget as well. So in terms of that excess reserve, if you will, that's over and above what our target is, we've identified some other community projects that we wanted to be able to at least propose for next year's budget that would use some of those excess reserves.
So Councilor Denning, Chair Denning, I had a quick follow-up question because I was tracking that same way, Councilor Chevlot. Right. I was curious as to, the whole time we've been talking about Fire Station 38, we've all sort of hung our hats on the fact that there would be no, not even if it's 1 cent, that there would be no taxpayer implications from doing this. And so, and I understand that we are very conservative and we're doing worst case scenarios on these numbers. Like, I completely get that. But is there any thought that for that difference, because I think we've all been marching under the assumption that this was going to be a $9.5 million deal, for that difference of 1.5 or whatever it is, can we fund that out of the reserves so that then we can totally eliminate any possibility of taxpayer increase?
I'm going to ask one legal question to Bruce Donaldson first. If we did want to have I'll call it a equity infusion, cash infusion, what you want to call it, obviously we'd have to appropriate the funds in our reserve to do that. But is that something we could contribute to a project like this, given the nature of the building corp structure?
Yes, I think you could if you wanted to.
Okay.
Because it sounds like, Jason, that the increase, you're saying that the increase is due to us trying to be prepared for any increases in materials. So we may or may not need that whole 1.5 million. We may only need a percentage of it. We may not need any of it at all. So I guess what my question is from probably Mr. Donaldson is, could we do $9.5 million to get the deal done, and then just have in our back pocket that if material costs exceeded what was projected, we could then go to the reserves for up to 1.5 million.
I guess the thing that you'd want to be very careful of in the bond market, you're not legally allowed to make lease payments until the building's complete. And so it's very important to the bondholders that that building gets completed on time so that lease payments can start and then therefore bondholders can get paid. So there might be some nervousness unless the money was absolutely set aside with a trustee, can't touch it, has to be available. There might be some nervousness in the bond market if,
So what you explained is exactly how our reserve fund is set up. Am I correct in that statement, Jason? You can't deplete our reserve fund without coming to the council, meaning $1.5 million, we would basically have to commit as a council that that money would be there up until the point that the building is fully complete.
I think what we should do, in given the council's concern, is I personally think we ought to proceed with this resolution the way it is, because again, we've assumed in that chart where it shows the tax rate and the lease payments that we're borrowing $11 million at 5% interest, which we know today we're not going to at least probably likely do 5%, and we're hoping we don't do 11. So if we were to get to the point where we have approval with this resolution the way it is, we don't know what the bids will come in. And to your point, Councilwoman Chavis, we could have the bids come in higher, lower, or exactly where we thought they were. And if I personally think if this project comes in as expected originally at the 9 million and some change, at today's current interest rates, that the actual tax increase will not be a tax increase, it'll be neutral. And I think I'd rather see us get to that point, assess where we are then, and then if we said, hey, it's going to raise it a penny, and we don't want to do that, so let's free up the reserve by whatever that amount is to not allow for that penny increase. I think we can do that, but I'd still like to, Bruce's point, have that flexibility, because I think, what he's saying is once an investor signs up, they want to know that there's enough funds there to get the project done. But I think we can accomplish the goal of the council by leaving it the way it is, and then assess once we get to the point of having bids and know what the actual cost is. Because I personally think, because of the conservative nature of how the resolution has to be written, it's always going to assume the worst case scenario. And in this case, the wild card is more the 5% instead of the 11 million.
Right. But if
I have a
5%.
Yeah.
Go ahead. That's your name. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So kind of a follow-up that thing. So just thinking about what both of you have just said. So how could you do it that way? I guess I got confused, because you would have to issue, wouldn't you, the $11 million in bonds, or at least have them committed. But if the building only cost, or you went to 9.5, are you going to tell $1.5 million worth of bondholders, never mind, or what's the process there?
I mean, we've kind of had, and I'll have maybe Paul Okeson chime in, but we've had discussions simply given the volatility of commodity pricing, that on the one hand, we want to bid out and make sure we can get the project done. But a concern I had was, again, don't know what the numbers could be, but let's say we bid it out and it comes in at 11.5 million. Well, we know we don't have the bonding capacity for that, so I decided that I don't think we can sell bonds until we actually know what the project cost is. So at that point, we would have those bids, and if it fits in line with, let's say it's 9 or 9.5 million, but we think we can get it done, then we sell the bonds. Or if we need to come back and say, hey, we're going to want to draw $1 million of our reserve in order to, preserve the tax impact. But I don't think in this kind of environment, it would be a very good idea to sell the bonds first and then go out and get bids and have it come in, and be significantly higher than what our capacity to borrow was.
Thank you. I think I got the which came first backwards there. So thank you for that clarification on that. And it seems like in the budget, we're well over the 20% reserve anyway, aren't we? Are we operating closer to 30 or so?
Yeah, we're a little north of 30.
Okay, so we have the capacity for $1.5 million. And in what you've proposed here, we had requested, the council had requested in our previous meeting an energy savings report, and I don't see anything here talking about even the energy savings that could be utilized. Is energy savings been taken into account at all on this?
Jason, you want us to respond to that?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Denny. I've got also Jake Waggle, who's been dealing with this project on sort of a day-to-day basis as well online to answer this. The energy savings piece is driven largely by the design and what's in code. I can't speak to exactly what we've discerned from that. I don't think it's substantive. Jake, would you offer anything different than that?
Yeah. So the energy savings is on the forefront of everyone's mind. But what I can say is the design has not progressed yet until the approvals take place. My gut would tell me that, I mean, this building built 30 or 40 years ago, our energy code is so much different now. There's going to be energy savings without any real effort, right? And then as the design progresses, you can analyze the cost payback of increasing beyond the requirements of the building codes.
In short, what he's saying is we're not far enough down the road to be able to evaluate or provide an answer to the question completely. But the point stands, the building's old enough to where whatever you're going to do now is going to be significantly better from an energy utilization, just because of the modern nature of it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I got off there a little bit with the energy savings. I remembered we had asked that be included in
Yes, sir.
Thought it was going to be part of this tonight.
Yeah, and if you have any questions to Controller Fenwick's point earlier, I'm happy to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the marketplace. But sure. I think, from a construction perspective only, I think the step he is taking is a prudent one. Hopefully this thing levels off quickly, but where we are right now, it's exceptionally volatile, probably unprecedented, would not be an unwarranted word.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, please, Councilor Shevlot.
What you brought up a point. So Jason, what is the dollar amount between what we authorized for reserve and what we're at now, approximately?
Approximately, our targeted dollar amount of the reserve was just under $5 million. And as of the end of last year, that reserve was about we were in total $8.5 million, so about $3.5 million above the target.
Okay. I only ask that because there's probably people listening or watching in that have no idea what these percentages of our annual budget were compared to what it's at now. And it also helps with this discussion of if we're $3 or plus million over, and you say you have these other projects, to this point, what part of that can be, maybe there's language that we can put in this as, I don't know if I want to go down that far, but I think these are all really good questions, and especially when it comes to raising property taxes on the heels of our property taxes just getting raised last year pretty significantly.
Thank you, Councilor Shevlot. I appreciate that. I just want to do one follow-up question, Councilor Giles, and I'll come right back. And so if you did hit 11.5 million or whatever overrun there might be, could you, I was taking notes and thinking about something else. Could you reiterate what your thought process would be for that other $500 million? Would you have to come back to the council for an overrun request for other funds, or what was that again, please?
Well, if we go out, again, under the assumption we haven't borrowed yet, and so we have bids in hand and the total project's going to be an $11.5 million, I guess we have two options at that point. We could entertain freeing up $500,000 of reserve to contribute, or or not doing the project. I think in order to, from the borrowing capacity standpoint, if that were to be raised, we would have to, and I'm going to ask Bruce to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if we had to come back and raise the borrowing capacity, we have to go through this whole process again.
Correct.
Okay, Counselor Giles, you had a question. Please go ahead.
I got some logic here with some questions mixed in. Listening to you guys, couple questions. I think it's very fair to say, with the years I've been working with this administration, you guys do everything conservatively. So when you brought the deal to the table at $9.5 million, how much time alluded to make you go, whoa, we've underestimated this job by $2 million?
I don't think we know if we have. It's just, and I'll ask Paul to chime in. It's what's taken place this year with construction.
So I'm just saying, how long has that time period been? Paul can tell me then.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Councilor Giles. So, and I've got a third-party article that I can send to you all too to kind of help quantify what we're seeing in the marketplace. But really, starting in January of this year, we saw a very hockey stick approach to cost volatility, and not just cost volatility also, but what we would call in our business lead time, ordering time. Simple things like paint are now very difficult. Even at a retail level, if you're going to paint your house today, you'd have a tough time going and getting paint. So things that we would normally just send over to the hardware store and pick it up and bring it back to the job are now becoming lead items, and it's having a cost impact. Things like, I think everybody knows anecdotally, wood in particular has gone up a tremendous amount in cost, so much so that you can buy a metal stud for cheaper than you can use a 2x4 for support systems. We're just seeing an unprecedented amount of volatility. Any millwork that comes out of Texas due to the weather, freezing there, shortage. Yep. So
can I cut you there? So
yeah, sure.
I want to make sure that I'm understanding properly. You said from January?
That's about when it started.
Right?
What's that?
Let's just give you 5 months for our, is that fair? All right.
Sure.
Okay, $2 million. It's made you $2 million nervous. You don't know? So then the next question I got to you, actually you and Jason both, how much did we go over on the police station from when we started the job to what we thought it was going to cost to the actual overruns?
I mean, Jason would have to quantify any specificity, but again, the significant sort of change order delta in the police station was based on the land.
We had it though. I just want to it's just for number. We had it though, right?
Yeah.
How much was it, Jason?
I mean, we came close to our 12.2 number. I mean, Jason, sorry, I don't know the specific number.
I don't want you to muddy it up. It's just
I don't recall the exact number, but we didn't exceed our borrowing amount.
I'm not asking you that. Can you please answer the question, please?
I told you I don't remember the exact amount.
Is it fair to say $500,000, $2 million, $10 million? How much is it fair for me to say for the basis of this philosophy I'm trying to go down?
It was probably plus or minus $500,000.
Yeah.
$500,000. That's all I'm trying to say for fairness, guys. I'm not trying to. So the thought, I'm sitting here listening going, why would I ever think that this is going to come in less than $11 million based upon the information that you're giving me? If I give you $11 million clearance, listening to the information you're giving me, I should walk away from the table expecting to spend $11 million because of the market and things because I just seen a $2 million increase in 5 months, potentially, okay? The point now, my next question is Dino in the room?
Yes.
Dino, I got a question for you.
I'm here. Councilor Giles.
Yes, thank you, sir. What is the national response time, the average response time for, expectations for us to deliver services, to our folks?
It's right under 9 minutes.
What is our response time in the city of Lawrence?
Our average response time is probably around 5 minutes, I would say.
Absolutely.
Average.
So we're 4 minutes under the national standard.
Yes.
Which is excellent. I just read an article today that is showing that, and this is, I thank you, Dino, I'm sorry. Thank you, Dino, that's all I needed from you. Thank you, sir. Jason, whoever's representing the city, thank you. It's making me question, with all the variables and all the timing, why are we building a fire station right now when nobody is building anything new construction who's smart? And if you read, and I mean, this is just general information, and then you guys are sitting there telling me this, and I know that this is a difficult pill to swallow, but I got to do what's right for the people of Lawrence. And all the data that you're giving me doesn't make me feel comfortable about spending. The other issue I got, question for you, Jason, is this. If you're estimating it on $5 million, and you said that you believe that we can get it possibly for the interest rate for half of that, and that's what my question always was, because, borrowing money at 5% is not cheap. You think we could do it for half of that, then why did we set the range at 3 to 5? Let's set it to, let's say if we think we could get lower than the actual range, I want to see it on the paperwork.
Why does that matter? Are you
Doesn't that bring the cost down?
Why does that matter what the range is? Because all that range does is, in that resolution, put the maximum parameter. So to your point, you're going to say, well, if the market's 2.5%, why put 5%? You think we're going to go out and borrow 5% in a 2.5% environment? But interest rates, like anything else, are subject to volatility.
Thank you. And the concern I have, though, is when typically, the first concern is when I give you a check for 11, I'm scared, I think you're going to spend 11. The next concern is to ensure that we get the money as cheaply as we can when we have $20 million in a savings account. So I'm trying to make sure that we borrow the money as cheaply as we can. And and then the building was told to me a few months ago was going to cost us $9 million. And now I was concerned on that first step that the amount could go up and then it did go up $2 million. And all of the market is directing us to believe that it's going to go up. So I don't know if we let the market cool down.
Councilor Giles, you asked
better for the city.
You asked the question last year if costs would go down.
I did, but it doesn't look like it's going up.
Exactly.
Right. I agree. Yes.
Councilor Giles, do you have anything else, or Councilor Chavis, do you have a question for administration?
Councilor Danny?
Yes.
I guess I have a question. I guess what he was asking me for is, I think that things will become stable. I'm just talking about stability. I don't know if they're going to go down. I don't know if they're going to go up, but I'm just saying, you're telling me the market is not stable. It's not predictable. And so that gives me some concern.
I would like to think we've earned the benefit of the doubt, over the last 5 years. Every financing we've done has come in at arguably, the lowest rate we can get. In fact, we sold 30-year bonds at the lowest rate in the history of Lawrence last year. So now
that's only one piece of the argument.
Now you're saying you have concerns whether we will borrow at the cheapest amount we can.
I asked questions to make sure that you would borrow at the cheapest in this finance committee. And then my next concern is concerned about the volatility of the construction rates. That's my concern. We're in a committee meeting, so I wanted my question and my concern addressed. And so I appreciate you addressing my concern about the rates. You educated me on something, but I'm also listening to you guys tell me that the market is unpredictable, and it's going, since in 4 months, it's had a significant increase. And so I'm concerned about stability when we're building, because I'm concerned that this thing could continue to go up and up, and this building could go to 11 or even $12 million or something. And of no fault of your own. I don't know.
Counselor Giles, I appreciate that.
In the frequently asked questions on 38, I believe I put a chart on there on construction costs, and over the last 40 years, there was 1 year when they went down.
Well, Mr. Okerson said we're in an unprecedented time.
So, I mean, we could certainly wait another year, but we could find an environment that's even worse than it is now. And I think what Paul Okerson and I have talked about is what do we do in the fall if things are still the way they are. And I think I have trust in Paul's judgment of the market. And he's said, you know, if things are the way they are now, maybe we wait until we get into the winter where, you know, there's flexibility, but at this point, we can't do anything until we agree to move forward.
I agree. But once we move forward, we're rolling. Thank you.
I would agree to everybody's point. Even if we looked at lumber prices just today, I saw something that said they fell 30%. So volatility is just the name of supplies and product right now. So there's really, you know, no way to know for sure if it's going to be 30% or flat in the next little bit, in my opinion. But Chief Metalis, I believe you had a question or a comment.
I want to go back to a statement that Councilor Giles made. The fire department gets involved with all these buildings that are built because we're involved with the plans. And you made a statement that nobody's building, they're not smart or whatever. There's building going on everywhere. Have you been on the fort lately and look at these big apartments and the hotel going up? They are building now, Councilor Giles. So I would appreciate if you make statements.
I'll send you the article that I read today, sir.
You have to be able to stand behind your statements.
I'll send you. I'm not saying that people aren't building.
You said that. No, you said people are not building. It was your statement, and they're building all over. So if you're going to make a statement, then stand behind your statement.
Oh, you know what, sir? I'll cut it at that. Thank you. I stand very behind every statement that I make, and I also stand behind the statement that I'm not sure that the service of the citizens in the city would get less if we do not build a new fire department. Also, sir, I also will let you know that it was a shame that we allowed our building to have fire code regulations and build go on this long inside our own building. So that's what I'll stand on that as well. Thank you.
Councilor Denny?
All right. Yes, sir. Bringing it back, Tom, Councilor Shevlock, what questions you have? And I believe,
well, I don't
you may have had a comment as well.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I don't know that I've got a question.
Fine.
I don't know that I've got a question, but I believe that the sense is we want to protect and make sure that we're not doing cost over. We're going to have a tax rate that's the citizens of Lawrence. And I think what we're looking for is something like what Lisa said is, where can we find this carve out that says in the event you go above, and I think Paul may or may not agree, it's kind of a wacky, weird, let's say we're at 1.795, we don't want to go back to the bondholders or don't want to go back to borrowing. Well, we're not going to at a higher level, but I just want to make sure that I think I'm capturing what I'm hearing from some of us is that I don't want to go back to the taxpayer with the potential taxpayer increase. And we have, you know, a 25% reserve, well above what we thought. So part of that reserve, I think, as we talked over the last, 5, 6 years, but is to anticipate in the event that we need that money for things of this nature. And so I don't know, Chris, I don't know that there's, because they come to us very often. So I admit, don't see these much other than the last one I saw was the police station 3 years ago. So I don't know if there's language that we put in a resolution where there's this safeguard or this gap that Lisa was referring to that, hey, we have language in there we set aside a public hearing that we've gotten this. And I think we may hear something from the public. So maybe some of this can be talked about offline. I certainly don't want to curtail this progress. Because I think, Chris, can we amend this as we move on after the public hearing?
Yeah, sorry, Tom, you were breaking up a little, but I think I got most of it. if we don't, we could amend it. I guess my short answer is I definitely would want to work with Bruce and make sure we were both comfortable with that. I'm not saying it can't be done. I just can't think of any circumstance when it's been done that way. And as Bruce pointed out, we need to make sure bondholders have comfort, or we're defeating the whole purpose of what you're trying to do.
I 100% agree, but I think giving the bondholders comfort, knowing that if it's going to be more, that the city is going to secure that with an escrow type activity. But maybe I'm kind of batting outside of my average here, but I'm just trying to get a sense. That is my concern. Also, is I don't want to go back to the property tax or the taxpayers of Lawrence, even if it's a couple cents on the dollar or a couple of cents on $100. When we've been talking about 9.5 and now it's 11.5. I understand the environment has changed in 5 months. Everyone is seeing that. But if we know that, say, okay, 11.5 million is the ceiling, and if the costs come above that because steel goes up and continues to go up, aluminum, that we're not going back out and saying, well, we're going to raise this now to 12 million. And I think I heard Jason said 11.5. I mean, that's what he's comfortable with. So I'll stop at that.
Yeah, if that's the will of the council, I'm more than happy to help try to work something out.
I don't know if it is or not. I just threw it out there.
So Chair, can I ask, I have 1 or 2 follow-up questions, if I may.
Please go ahead.
So 9.5 million, I guess my question is, if we have assumed the worst or the highest rate of 5%, and let's say it's 2.5, then doesn't that cover the gap for the 1.5 million over 20 years? And some, potentially? And I guess that's a question for either Jason or Bruce.
I guess so you're saying if we sold these at 5%, but it ends up being 2.5%, does that cover the 1.5 million?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess we have 2 things going. We have a portion of the debt that is being paid because of the interest, and then a portion because of the principal. If the cost of this to build ends up going up, we still need that principal amount to pay up front. So it'd still lower the lease payment and lower our total cost because the interest rate's lower, but it doesn't change the principal amount of what we need to borrow if we need to borrow more because of the cost going up from the original estimate.
But it does reduce or eliminate the potential impact on the taxpayer.
Absolutely, and that's kind of my point is if we borrow where we think we should, I don't believe there will be an impact on the tax rate. Based on
no impact on the tax rate at 11 million.
Because the resolution assumes the worst of the, I'll call it the max of the terms, the 11 million and the 5% of the max interest rate. So that's what the lease payment in that resolution is based off of. And we think right now, I mean, the interest rate ought to be somewhere around half that, at least as of today.
Okay. Councilor Chavis, you have any more comments?
No, I don't. Thank you.
And maybe
I've got one more.
Go ahead. Well, wait a second, Councilor Chevalier. I believe Controller Fenwick had one more comment.
Yeah, sorry.
And I guess to Council President Chavis's point, I would rather see us go down that path and get to the point where we've identified the cost and what we think the interest rate is, and then be able to present after this has been approved, when that time comes, and say, here's where here's how much we're going to borrow, and here's what the interest rate is, and be able to show if that is the case, there's no impact on the tax rate. If there is not, it's going to cause it to go up. Then we could entertain doing that, drawing on the reserve then to lower it so there is no impact. So either way, there shouldn't be the concern of there being an impact on the tax rate itself, and we can get there once we get to the point of knowing for sure what the cost is versus speculating at this point, because we just don't know.
Yeah, I would be in support of anything that absolutely, for me, I agree with Tom, there cannot be any taxpayer impact. So I would agree with any solution that we could work together to come up with that would ensure that would not be the case. So thank you for answering my question. I appreciate it.
Jason, one other question, and thanks for that clarification. What, on a timetable, when these go to cost of issuance and go to market, what is the time frame that you think that we're on right now? When do these get priced?
Well, I think, and I don't know if, yeah, Bruce is still on. Bruce, I think if this is adopted in June, and there's still some waiting periods we have to go through, I think we're in the clear, so to speak, from a borrowing standpoint, I believe is it mid to late August?
Yes, late August would be the first time we would be able to go.
So,
okay.
And then at that point, I don't think we would necessarily want to borrow. I think that's then when Paul and I have had conversations about getting to the point of knowing what the cost is to then be able to assess, can we do this? Did it really increase? So we would sell the bonds after that.
Yeah, and just do you know what the rates were in January by chance of 21 are now, or something like this approximately? Was it 2.5 basis or 2?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna maybe ask Bob Swintz to clarify, but I mean, I think rates have pretty much been at this level for most this year.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Paul, I think you had a point you wanted to make real quick, and we've unfortunately ran out of time, so I'll have to go pretty quick here.
I just wanted to say, there's been no design work done as we've waited for this process, and that's really where we need to get is further design so that we can get to better pricing, to Jason's point. So I just wanted to make that point clear. Yeah.
And thank you to both of you and to the administration, Controller Fenwick and Chief Patalis for coming out tonight and answering our questions. I think, me personally, I'm right in line, I think, with Councilor Chevlot and Councilor Chavis. This is something we don't want to impact to the taxpayer. We want to make sure any overruns are covered. So unless I hear a motion, maybe it would be better for us to schedule a follow-on meeting to tonight before the next council meeting, and so we can hash out these details a little more.
Well, actually, Sean, I would make a motion, and here's why. I mean, this is the whole reason why you set up these committee meetings, is to have these dialogues and discussions. And there was two primary issues that I was concerned about and questioning, and I feel comfortable with the process because this process still has a couple of more legs to it. And so I don't want to impede it any longer, because I know we have other benchmarks that we can address more of these issues, especially when it comes to public comment, and then it's going to come back before our council again for final approval. So I don't want to impede the progress. You've answered my questions. I think most of us have voiced our concern, and it's on. I would just make a motion to move this to the council for the next steps.
Okay, the motion's been made. I'd need a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. So I'll take a roll call vote to recommend to the full council. Councilor Chevlot?
Yes.
Councilor Chavis?
Yes.
Councilor Giles?
Yes.
Councilor Denny? Yes. So the resolution passes a recommendation to the full council 4-0. All right, thank you, everybody. Our next meeting will be in just a few minutes.
Mr. Chair, can I say something really quickly?
Yes, sir.
I just want to point out that the actual final council action on this resolution can't take place until after the second public hearing in the first
Correct.
meeting in June.
Okay.
So,
I have a
so
question.
we still have to have that second public hearing.
Okay. And
Sean?
Kathy, you had a question. Yes.
Do I need to schedule a finance meeting before the next council meeting?
No, I don't believe
No,
we.
public hearing is
There's
That was
nothing
the
on
discussion. Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll
So
just
we're
go
fine.
right to the council meeting on the 7th. Okay, thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Okay.
So we're on the same channel, right?
Yeah, so this adjourns the finance committee and hang on for the full council meeting.